Asian descent, has officially been charged with murder and aggravated assault. Now,
how are you feeling about the recent news? What are your thoughts? What hurts you the most? And how can other people show up for you? And how can they support you?
Well, this isn't currently regards to the question, but Alicia just sent into the chat a screenshot from this Instagram post that basically came out and said that showed this Facebook post that the shooter had made basically beforehand, talking about how China is engaged in a COVID cover-up, et cetera, which is just emphasizing his later actions. So it's in the chat if anyone wants to look into that. Yeah, Sabrine said disappointed but not surprised. Yeah, that's very fair.
Oh, I just want to say, like, I know I don't show up to these meetings as much as I should, but I just want to say about the situation that Joe Biden, he posted on Twitter that he was also the same thing with the sheriff and oh, we don't know what the motive is still unclear, when literally the guy, what I put in the chat, he posted on his last post on social media before the shooting was him literally blaming China for the pandemic and then saying that we all need to, all Americans have to fight against China, which is really ironic that just because it's, I don't know, a Asian hate crime, that for some reason the literal president of the United States is unable to, say it for what it is. But I don't know. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. The media just kind of manipulates the whole narrative because they're saying that it's not racially motivated, but instead stems from his sexual addiction, which to me is just what does that even mean? Just call it what it is. This incident is a culmination of white supremacy and misogyny and Asian fetishization all throughout history, and it's a culmination of that results to this shooting to happen. And I wish the media would.
I mean, sadly, I don't think that he's really. Sadly, I don't think people will really do much about it. Because the way that he's been talking about it and the way that people have been spreading it in the media makes it seem like it's just not that big of a deal. They don't care as much, or he's really not that bad of a person. But I think the same things with the BLM movements. I think it's very possible that he might get away with this, and I think that stuff like that just is not okay. I don't think people should be getting away for anything similar to that.
Yeah, I agree. Because the fact that they called it a bad day and it's oh, it's just a porn addiction. Oh, it's not racially stemmed. It's just both society and just people's attempts to cover up this ongoing issue. And I don't understand why, because it's not helping anybody. If you just keep beating around the bush, nothing's going to get solved. And that's already been extremely prevalent with BLM. And I'd rather have it not spread to Asians, because if we just keep this going, nothing is going to get solved and things are just going to get worse.
This relates to the first question, but kind of just more adding on to the media presence and about how the literal president is brushing this off. Most of the general public gets their news from social media, because that's just an easy way to get news. And this is a bad example, but my brother saw some stupid post about Eminem being dead and he believed it on a meme account, and it was super fake, and people just fall for everything. And the fact that the president is coming out and saying this is oh, it's not a big deal, that's a really big problem, because a lot of people are just going to be oh, well, this isn't a primary issue, this isn't something I need to worry about, because if the president is brushing it off, then therefore it's completely okay. So I think that that's honestly just really wrong on so many levels, and people aren't posting about it as much as it should be. If it was someone else, it might have been bigger. If it was it's just tough.
So with COVID-19 and the pandemic, how were you affected? Please share any experiences of racism and microaggressions that you or someone close to you has experienced, if you're comfortable.
And Sabrine had said for question 2, for her own personal experiences, she was racially profiled at school and nothing really happened, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And she had someone had told her I was too dark to be where I claimed to be from.
Serene, can you go into detail with that if you're comfortable?
Yeah, sure. So this was last year in math class, and this kid is, I guess he's always pretty curious from like where people are from. And so he asked me, and I told him, and he said, "No, you can't be from there. You're too dark." And I said, "That's really racist." And I said, "Please don't talk to me." And Sarah Wallach heard what he said, and she filed an HIB report on my behalf. And when I went in to go get interviewed, she also asked a bunch of other students to come in who heard this boy talk about me, like in the bus, in school, or would ask questions about me. And so this one student, he told the administrator that I was making a big deal out of nothing. And because of that, nothing else really happened. I just filed a report, an investigation went on, and now he's just not allowed to talk to me. But he still does, and he's still put in the same groups as me, so yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Brian had said in chat that he had passed a ball that came from another court back to them, and they screamed Corona at him, which is really, really insensitive and disrespectful. I'm sorry about that.
Brian, was this at school or was this like somewhere else?
This was at like Newport. During tryouts. Passed the ball back to them. They screamed Corona. I'm glad I kept my cool because I don't know what I would have done. Just disrespectful.
Alicia and Romina and Chancy have their hands raised. So I think I saw Alicia's hand first, so you can go.
Okay, cool. Well, this one was like at the start of the pandemic. So there's this guy, you guys probably, in my grade, you guys can probably tell who it is by me just talking about it. But basically, in French class, I think it was just this one time, we're doing this activity, we're doing rotations around like the room, and so you just switch tables and stuff like that. And apparently, it was like I didn't even notice this until my friends told me later, like at the end of class. But apparently, like every time I passed by him, like he would like put his shirt up onto his nose, which I think he also did with other Chinese students. But and this is a guy who's like says he's like my friend or whatever, but and then later on I only noticed it because I sat in his seat for one of the rotations, and then he's like, ew, a Chinese person sat in my seat. And then obviously if he's gonna say something stupid like that, people are gonna laugh. And at the time I wasn't really offended by it because I mean obviously it's offensive, but it's like it's this guy like does this stuff all the time that I wasn't even surprised. And like my friends were telling me about it, and I was just like thought that was like obviously like it's like horrible, but it's sad that it's so like normal for him and for other people at our school. Like he already had a HIB report filed against him, and then I got involved in that because like my friend who filed it like knew about what happened, and then so we used that. But and then this is a different one, but this was like I think it was either like right before the pandemic, but I wasn't really sure. But some of you guys already know this, but there's this one time my mom was in Costco in Issaquah, and she was grabbing something, and she thought this guy like it was this white old not old but like older white guy, and she thought he was done like grabbing something, and then she was like grabbing it, and then he like literally like pushed her to the ground and spit on her and was like, go back to Hong Kong, like whatever. And what was sad about it is like she was like crying, she was so upset. I wasn't there, but she was crying, and then she went to the Costco like checkout, and she was still crying, and they were like the cashier happened to be like also East Asian, and then she was like asking her like what happened, and she told her, and then she was like, okay, well, like if you remember what he looks like, we can take away his Costco membership. But she was like so distraught by the whole event that she wasn't able to remember what he looked like, except for that he was like this white guy. And what's even more sad is that she like never told like me or my dad or my brother about it because she was like too embarrassed by it, and she didn't want us to like be afraid that like in our own like community there were people like that. But then now it's like from that event she like keeps telling all her other like East Asian friends to like not go to Issaquah and stuff because that's like where all the white supremacists are, which is really sad because it's like you think that since in like the Seattle Puget Sound area there's like so many East Asians that it wouldn't be such a problem, but you know it is. So
yeah, I'm so sorry that happened to your mom. That's terrible. I think who else had their hand raised? Chincy?
Yeah, Chancy and Romina.
Okay, Chincy can go.
Okay, so there's like a
several events. I guess like the first one that was affecting me more like directly was like, so in the beginning of the pandemic, I was wearing masks and gloves, and like during PE class, this guy like deliberately coughed into my face. And so like I was really worried about that because like my grandparents were visiting and then diabetic. So like it was a really high risk. And so the second incident was like in humanities class, this like seventh grader, he yelled out, they ate bats. And so like he was, and then teacher like was kind of explaining like you can't just say they ate bats, you know, like that's really racist. But like he didn't, I don't think he got held accountable. Oh wait, and for like the first incident when the person deliberately coughed in my face, like I reported it to the principal, and she just said that we're gonna deal with it when we go back to school, like in person. And then like the third incident was like during math class. These two people were like making jokes about coronavirus, and I was just like, and like in that time, it hadn't like there were no cases that were like tested outside of China. So I just like told them like you can't like joke about things that don't affect you. And he said, yeah, I can. And like it just shows like the white and like male privilege of the students.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it.
Romina, if you want to add on.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is not a really experience, but on the news I read that in Seattle, there were Asian churches that this white supremacy guy, he wrote in big letters a really mean words to the churches, basically Asian churches. He wrote the F word and then he wrote China. And I was really disgusted by that. And I'm very tired of all the Asian attacks in Seattle. Like it's like embarrassing our country, embarrassing our city, and I'm just tired of it. Sometimes I just want to leave to another city or state.
Okay. I want to share my own experience. I had one incident where I had a white male student of mine say to me that I bet you eat bat soup for breakfast. And I remember just brushing it off again, like what Alicia said, just like brushing it off because there were people around me and they were all laughing and stuff. And I thought, okay, like I shouldn't make a big deal about it. Like it's so normalized. And then another incident where it was like my friend, this was an AP World, and someone at her table told her that it's like all your fault that this virus is here, and it's like China's fault, and like you're Chinese, so it's like your fault. And everyone at the table didn't say anything. And after class, like she came running to me and she was like crying and just like nothing. And then I don't know if that person ever got held accountable, but no one ever said anything at her table, and I felt so terrible for her. And yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's really hard to deal with these types of things when you're in a public setting, because especially when, you know, like if it's at school and you don't want to, like, I guess, quote unquote, embarrass yourself by making a scene or something. If someone, yeah, I had the same experience. It was the same person as Alicia's story. I think he had told me, and like other people, is like, oh, like you're Chinese, you started the virus, et cetera, all this stuff that you know, he just says. And this is when like Corona had first started, so I guess people didn't know how in depth it was going to be, because no one expected this to last like more than a year. But yeah, it's really hard to deal with it when there's people around you and you don't want to, you know, make a big fuss out of it, even though it's something to like, it is very something that is very like you're able to be upset. You know, no one's going to judge you if you get upset by it, because it's inherently awful.
Yeah.
But I guess some people are too nervous to make a scene, and that's completely fine. You know, I could see how one wouldn't feel super comfortable.
I want to add on that, like, as an Asian woman, I often feel that I shouldn't be taking up space, if that makes sense. Like when I walk into a room, like especially as like a girl, I notice like the way my language changes when I'm talking to like male peers and stuff. Like I just feel like I shouldn't be taking up space and I shouldn't be making a huge scene when I walk into the classroom. Sorry. And yeah. I think causes and stems from Asian fetishization and what perpetuates it in our generation. So, for example, TikTok culture, media, etc.
I think that with the whole Asian fetishization thing, the chart that you showed from before, I think a lot of it, because I know social media really helps us get the word out. You see, a lot of knowledge I have now is from people's social media and things that they share, but there's also a downside to this because a lot of the fetishization is stemmed from entertainment and media, because people are going to, like Asians in the entertainment industry, just like K-pop actors, anime, stuff like that. You're gonna take it and you're gonna make strange content, and people are gonna take that and they're gonna enjoy it and they're gonna hold on to that. That's why people have. It's really weird if it's like an actual race of people, because you're claiming that this entire race of people fits your little your view of like sex and stuff, and that's really awful because you're putting an entire race of people into what you want just because you derive pleasure from it, and I think that's really awful. This is spread all through like social media, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and I think that it's so normalized, it's getting to the point where it's awful, because if it's like going back to the beginning story of the shooting in Atlanta, I think if it was his own little sex addiction, that's his own problem, and he shouldn't have to take it out on poor civilians.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that he's using that as his excuse is awful.
Yes.
And if you have an issue, find other ways to solve it that don't involve mass shootings. It's awful.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add on to that?
Oh yeah, sorry, I've talked a lot, but adding on to the whole thing of fetishization, it really shows, like, people say that, like, oh, just because like fetishization is like, oh, preference or whatever, and there's no actual like consequence of it. But if you think about it, like, if they've actually done research into it, like, Asian women in the porn industry have experienced the highest rates of like abuse and violence in the industry. And also with the whole thing, there's like been growing awareness of like sexual assault and all that stuff in social media right now. And the thing is, like, in America, I think the statistic is like 1 out of 5 women, it's like, in Americans, it's like reported that they've experienced it. But then if you look at the statistics of Asian American women, it's like 55% of Asian American women, which is like insane to think, because that goes like from 20% to 55%. So it really shows how like negative the consequences of fetishization can be.
Yeah. I want to say that Asian fetishization stems from white supremacy because, white men view Asian women as something that they have to conquer and to dominate over, because Asian women are viewed as like submissive and quiet, and they just do whatever you tell them to do. And so it kind of stems from that white supremacy feeling of like, I am superior than you. And all throughout history too. I think I was talking about this in World History today because we're learning about the Second World War, and comfort women were these like women from like Korea and China and stuff, and they were taken in by like the Japanese as like sex workers and like prostitutes to like please the soldiers or something like that. And when like Japan invaded China, they like took like thousands of women with them to become comfort women, so basically like sex workers. And yeah, does anyone else have anything to add on to this question?
I think like Asian fetishization is like really obvious in its animation. Like there's like people on TikTok who pretend to be Asian, like they're these white people who will claim that they're Korean. Yeah, and we have all these people like doing like the fox eye trend, and like in the fashion industry, they always like over sexualize Asian clothing.
Yeah.
And especially, I think like Vogue had this white model do like geisha clothing.
Carly Kloss, yeah.
Yeah, Carly Kloss, and like in like all these other soaps, you always see like the Asian woman seen as like the sexy one. And then especially with like Harvey Weinstein, he almost raped this Chinese woman, and he specifically said, "I'm so excited, like I finally get a Chinese one." And like so he like specifically targeted her because of her ethnicity. And so like that's just like it's just so terrifying, like to be targeted for your ethnicity.
To be viewed as like an object.
Yeah, and like then I think I saw this white man on TikTok like explain how to get Asian women, and he literally referred to them like as objects, like, oh, if you lose one, get another one.
Yeah,
It's
like
just disgusting.
like all the good ones are in China. You're not gonna find them here in America or something like that.
Yeah.
Just does our school and community need to make to prevent microaggressions and racism from happening?
I think there's already like some form of like ways to prevent it, but like I don't think they're really that effective. And like I think, you know, people don't really recognize when it's a microaggression or a form of racism because it's just been, you know, a part of like their lives for so long. So I think that's also a really big problem, that like people just never recognize it. Because I'm sure if people knew that what they were doing was wrong, they wouldn't do it. But like they just don't know. Like it's just a lack of knowledge.
So definitely.
Yeah, I think that things like this club really help add in some awareness and a safe space for people, even if you're Asian, you know, just to be educated. So I think that's a really good start, but there still is a long way we need to go. Sabrina had her hand up, so you can go.
Okay, so at least from my experience, I don't know if like sexual harassment falls under like a microaggression. It does?
Yeah, I would say so.
It does? Okay, well, first of all, that happened to me this year. And like in a virtual setting too, a little strange. Okay, well, I mean, I just feel like HIB is not enough. It's just a joke to anyone who hears about it, but it's like people aren't understanding the severity of all these things, because like the one thing I can do if someone's being just blatantly racist like they have been to me is file an HIB report. But what does that do? You get called in to talk like 4 or 5 times. That's a hassle for me. I miss class for that. And then these kids tell everyone in the grade. This is such a small school, everyone finds out, and nothing happens. So HIB is just a joke. There has to be some other form of severity. Like in my case, when I was being profiled last year, this kid still was in ASB. Nothing happened to him. Tell me, how can you hold such a high position in ASB, be racist, get caught, and nothing happened to that kid? There are like rules of impeachment, and nothing happened to him. All I got was like, I'm sorry that happened to you. You just don't have to talk to him. That's not solving anything for me or for him, because obviously people like that need to grow, and that just made it seem like, okay, you just can't talk to her. Well, that's not going to affect him, is it? So I think there definitely needs to be a change in that, some more severity. And honestly, just I'm going to see if this can happen, but especially this time, we really need to have a whole school assembly about Black Lives Matter and this whole thing against Asians. And as an exec, I'm going to ask Artie and see if this is a possibility, because just this, like, I don't know, group of like 13, 14 people is not enough. And there are so many students in this school that genuinely need help and to grow up and be more mature, because this is not normal and this is not okay.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, adding adding on to what Sabrina had said, yeah, I had my own personal experience with sexual harassment, and it's I don't know, like it's first of all hard to really confront, and with it, like I told, you know, I told the counselor, and it did take a few months, but I think the best they told me was I think he got suspended because it wasn't just me. It was a trend, which is very unfortunate, but he got suspended and taken out of his focus week and removed from my PE period. But at the end of the year, the best they offered me was to just they offered me a safety contract where I just wouldn't be in his classes. And our school is super small, so it's kind of hard to avoid somebody. But they said, oh, no overlapping classes, none of this. But it didn't really help in general, because I did end up seeing him at Back to Business Day handing out schedules, so that made it really awkward. And there was no personal apology. There was nothing. It was just like the counselor just told me, oh, like his parents apologize. Like I don't want that. I want
Your
an
half-hearted apology.
Yeah, and I think somebody else that was a victim had gotten a restraining order, so good for them. Um, but yeah, nothing really happened, but they did end up switching schools, I think, on their own terms. So that's good, I guess. But I think that was their decision and not the school's, which I'm a little disappointed about, because if this is happening to multiple people, it's a big issue.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 12:35. I have 4 more questions on my PowerPoint, but I don't think we'll have enough time to go over all of them. If anyone has any lingering thoughts or things they want to say about this topic, you're free to do so.
Alicia has her hand raised, so you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I keep talking. I feel bad because I'm like talking.
No, it's fine. This is a space where you can talk as much as you want.
Thanks, guys. I just also want to mention I didn't even realize this until actually I don't know how long it's been, but there was this group of once I say this and people watch this, they're gonna know what I'm talking about. But there was this group of guys in the grade above, and then apparently there was this whole thing, I think it was last year, where they had this, I don't know, this thing for me or whatever, which was weird because it's you think about it, there's so many girls in our grade, and it's okay, it's just not gonna think about it too hard, right? And then all this stuff happened. And it was really weird because it was an entire group, and apparently there was other stuff that happened, they added me to group chats and then all this random stuff, and it was just really strange because I didn't know them I mean, I knew some of them well, but not most of them, and it was an entire group, which was really weird. But then later on, it was I was talking to my friend about it, and then he was do you think it's because you're Asian? Are they fetishizing you? And I really hadn't thought about this, but then at the same time, this group also had been exposed in this group chat they had, which horrible things, horrible people. You guys probably heard about it, but it was literally disgusting, about teachers, about students, about mainly female students. It was horrible. And then in it, they were just talking about also fetishizing Asian people, and they were saying I'm not gonna say this because it's not school appropriate, but they were just saying stuff about Asian girls and whatever, and it just really makes you think that it's just so weird because I didn't even realize at the time because it's oh, well, what if it's, I don't know, but it's just so gross to think about how it's they're what at our school and they're this young and it's already a thing with them. Yeah, and it's just really fun, and then so also it sucks because I feel as Asian women, a lot of us have to think about if someone oh, we're talking to some person we're interested in, and then you have to check to just make sure oh, are all their exes Asian, or all the people they're following Asian, it's not some sort of weird fetishization, or if it's or if it's just a preference. So I think that's just something I want to bring up.
Yeah, and especially when people bring up oh, Asian fetishization is a compliment. That means they like you because of this, they have a huge preference towards you. It's not a compliment. It's disgusting and weird, and just every time I talk to a guy, it's are you talking to me because you just like me as a person, or are you talking to me because you just like the idea of who I am and what I symbolize because I'm somehow exotic and submissive or whatever.
Yeah, I feel so bad for anyone who's ever experienced anything like that or felt that way, like what you said, Sophie. I think that it's just such a really degrading position to be in, and it makes you feel you're not really being appreciated for who you are. It's just you're just there because people don't really want to be friends with you. They want to have other relations.
Yeah, they have their own fantasies of who you should be and stuff. And I just want to say what our white counterparts can do for the Asian community right now is to just continue to have these conversations with your family members, especially because we're not going to get anywhere if you don't change your mindset and your thinking, and you like kind of decolonize the narratives that you're fed. And so having conversations about that and like reading books, nonfiction, fiction by Asian authors, listening to our stories, and just like talking about it is so important. And I'm really saddened by the news. And I know it's like really difficult now. It was really difficult for me yesterday, and it's still kind of difficult for me now to talk about it, because those women were mothers, they were sisters, they were aunts. You know, it could have been my mom, it could have been your mom, your sister. So it's just really difficult. And yeah, so these are just some of the pictures of people that have been attacked and assaulted and have died in the past year due to anti-Asian hate crimes. And when I see these faces, I see my own grandpa and my grandma, my own family. And so, yeah. And yeah, so these are just hard times, and we're always here for you. So continue to donate, educate, and spark further discussions with your family and others about this topic. I want to thank everyone for coming. It means the world for me that you're showing up and having this conversation. And yeah.
He was pretty much fed up and kind of at the end of his rope, and yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did.